In the deepest reaches of the Amazon basin, where the canopy rises like cathedral vaults above a floor of leaf litter and decay, the light dies early. Twilight here is not a passing moment. It is a slow suffocation of color and contrast, swallowed by a darkness so complete that even the moonlight finds itself filtered into whispers by 1,000 layers of living green. This is not a silence, though. When the light vanishes, the forest awakens into another kind of vision, one not made of sight but of sound. The pulse of the jungle shifts, and high above the forest floor, a different kind of hunter begins to stir. Bats, often underestimated or misrepresented, are among the Amazon's most ecologically diverse and complex residents. With over 150 known species, ranging from insectivores to frugivores, nectar feeders to blood drinkers, they present nearly a third of all mammalian diversity in the rainforest. They are not merely animals navigating the night. They are the sentient threads sewn into the dark fabric of the jungle's metabolism. Their wings are thin membranes stretched across elongated fingers, designed not only for flight, but for agile maneuverability through dense branches, narrow caves, and woven vines. Their lungs are adapted to withstand extreme oxygen demands, and their hearts beat rapidly, sometimes over 1,000 times per minute, just to sustain their ceaseless flight. Echolocation, the biological sonar used by most bats, is not merely a navigational tool, it is a sensory strategy evolved with precision. Emitting high-frequency calls well beyond the range of human hearing, bats listen to the echoes bouncing off the environment to construct an internal three-dimensional map of their surroundings. These sounds return to them with astonishing detail. The size, shape, texture, and even movement of an insect's wing in pitch-black conditions. In a jungle choked with visual obstructions, mist, foliage, shadow, echolocation becomes more than an adaptation. It becomes perception itself. To imagine the jungle through a bat's senses is to imagine a place not of trees and leaves, but of reverberations and resonances, of invisible walls and corridors drawn by returning sound waves. This acoustic reality makes bats more than just night flyers. In the metaphor of the rainforest as a superorganism, bats are the sensory organs, the retina and cochlea fused into living mesh of aerial scouts. They detect changes in insect population densities. They register the blooming patterns of night flowers. They find fruits too young to fall and too hidden to be seen. In short, they are feedback loops, biological sensors that transmit subtle changes in the environment across vast forest spans. But the price of such adaptation is constant exposure. Bats carry a symbiotic legacy written not just in DNA but in pathogens. The vampire bat, Desmodus rotundus, feeds on blood, mostly from livestock, but occasionally from humans. Its bite is gentle, aided by anticoagulants in its saliva that prevent clotting. Victims often never feel the intrusion. Yet with this secretive feeding comes a darker exchange. Vampire bats are vectors of the rabies virus, a pathogen so virulent, so destructive, that once neurological symptoms begin, there is no returning from the abyss. Rabies hijacks the nervous system, driving its victims into delirium, spasms, hallucinations, and ultimately, death. It is not the bite that kills, it is the viral rewrite of the mind. And yet even in colonies that feed on fruit or nectar, species like the lesser spear-nosed bat, Philostomus discolor, risks persist. Their guano, rich in nutrients, accumulates in caves and hollow trees. In these warm, nitrogen-rich conditions, Histoplasma capsulatum, a soil fungus, thrives. Spores released from disturbed guano can be inhaled unknowingly by humans entering bat caves or clearing roosting sites. Histoplasmosis is not immediately fatal, but it is insidious. The infection begins in the lungs, causing fever, coughing, and chest pain. In immunocompromised individuals, it can spread systemically, leading to organ failure and death. Entire mining or logging crews have been struck down by this invisible threat. The spores, a byproduct of ecological intimacy, too casually dismissed. Still, for all their danger, bats perform services so fundamental to the Amazon's survival that their removal would unravel entire biotic networks. Frugivorous species such as the short-tailed fruit bat, Carolia perspicillata, disperse seeds across miles, ensuring genetic flow between isolated tree populations. Pollinating species like the long-tongued bat, Glossophaga soricina, are essential for night-blooming plants, especially cacti and certain rainforest vines. Their tongues are longer than their bodies, extending deep into tubular flowers, transferring pollen between blooms like hovering syringes. In the absence of these bats, entire genera of plants would fail to reproduce. There are rare behaviors as well, subtleties that reveal just how complex bat ecology can be. Some species form stable colonies where mothers recognize the calls of their own pups among thousands. Others engage in grooming behaviors thought to reduce parasite loads or strengthen social bonds. Still others, like Trachops cirrhosis, have been observed eavesdropping on the mating calls of frogs, listening for specific frequencies associated with preferred prey. This is a level of acoustic specialization that implies cognitive flexibility, an ability not just to hear, but to choose, interpret, and adapt. If the forest is indeed a superorganism, then these bats are its probes, gathering information from the air, the canopy, the understory, and the caves. They move information through their behavior, their migrations, and their appetites. Their presence or absence can predict insect outbreaks, fruiting seasons, even the health of pollination chains. To harm the bats is to blind the forest. To kill them is to sever the nerves that alert the jungle to imbalance. But the jungle too adapts. In regions where deforestation and livestock expansion have given vampire bats greater access to blood, populations of these bats have surged. In turn, rabies outbreaks have increased, not only among cattle but in human communities. The jungle, when denied its balance, reacts not with silence but with feedback loops that echo through blood and fever. The very species that once played a limited role in ecosystem function becomes a blunt instrument of ecological pushback. The jungle does not seek vengeance, but it enforces equilibrium, and it does so with the precision of its flying senses. In the Amazon, survival is not about strength alone, it is about perception. Those who cannot adapt to the jungle's darkness, its shifting sounds, its cryptic signs, do not last. The bats have mastered this world not with force, but with perception so refined it borders on foresight. They are the watchful eyes of the unseen night, the murmuring sentience above the leaves. And if the jungle is aware, truly aware, then it is through the flight of these creatures that it sees, hears, and remembers who trespassed beneath its branches. In the Amazon rainforest, movement is often subtle. Leaves shift in slow motion under the weight of moisture. A branch flexes with the silent departure of a monkey. Wind coils through the canopy in soft, directionless currents. But sometimes the forest pulses. Not with sound or sudden weather, but with a living, marching tide of insects that rolls across the floor like a liquid organism. This is not chaos. This is strategy. This is the passage of Ecceton burchelli, the infamous army ant, and the rainforest does not resist it. It makes way. To understand army ants is to understand that intelligence in the jungle does not always come with a brain. These ants are born with no centralized hierarchy. There are no generals, no planners, only instinct and chemistry. Yet together they form one of the most coordinated and formidable predatory forces in the natural world. At the heart of their strategy lies emergent behavior, a phenomenon where simple individuals following basic rules create complex and adaptive systems. Each ant responds to chemical signals, pheromones, left behind by its sisters. One ant detects the faintest trace of scent on a leaf and shifts its direction. Another follows, then thousands. The result is a superorganism, hundreds of thousands of bodies acting as a single neural network. Their column moves with eerie purpose. At the front, a loose arc of scouts fans out across the detritus-strewn forest floor. These are the sensors, tasting the air for prey, for threat, for opportunity. Once a food source is found, a cluster of spiders, a beetle colony, a bird's nest, it is marked chemically, and the living column reroutes with chilling precision. What follows is a biological storm. Prey animals rarely stand a chance. Fangs too small to see up close become surgical blades in the tens of thousands. Every insect, larva, worm, or small vertebrate in the path of the swarm is torn apart, piece by piece, carried off in fragments toward the rear of the column where the queen rests in her roving bivouac. In a matter of minutes, an area teeming with life is reduced to bone, shell, and silence. Unlike many ant species that operate from permanent nests, eciton colonies are nomadic. For much of their 20-day cycle, they form temporary encampments by linking their own bodies together, legs hooked around thoraxes in dense, living walls, a phenomenon known as a bivouac. These biological structures can contain upwards of 700,000 individuals. Inside, the queen, a reproductive behemoth twice the size of a worker, swells with eggs, her ovipositor laying as many as 80,000 eggs per cycle. As larvae hatch, the swarm intensifies, entering its most aggressive foraging stage, the nomadic phase. During this time, the column may stretch over 100 meters long, devouring up to 2,000 prey animals per hour. Ecologically, army ants perform both predator and scavenger roles, clearing carrion, controlling pest populations, and inadvertently providing meals for numerous commensal species. Certain birds, such as antbirds and motmots, follow the swarm, not to avoid it, but to exploit it. They wait at the edges, snapping up insects that leap away from the advancing front. Even some mammals, like coatis, have been observed shadowing columns to steal flushed-out prey. It is a strange alliance, a parade of death that creates a mobile buffet for the opportunistic. Yet for all their contribution to forest dynamics, army ants are not without risk to larger animals, including humans. While a healthy adult might escape with a few stings, the dangers intensify in specific tragic contexts. In isolated rural villages bordering the forest, there are grim tales of what happens when an ant swarm infiltrates a hut overnight. Infants left in hammocks, the elderly too weak to move, or animals tied in place become immobilized victims. The ants do not hesitate. They enter orifices, nostrils, ears, mouths, and suffocate their prey from the inside, methodically dismantling soft tissue. These accounts, though rare, are not exaggerations. Army ants are equipped with sickle-shaped mandibles designed to pierce and cut, not sting. Their weaponry is simple but effective: clamp, twist, sever. What makes them even more unnerving is their dual capacity as both aggressors and healers. Among some Amazonian tribes, these ants are intentionally used as natural sutures. A wounded person has the edges of their skin pulled together, and soldier ants are applied directly. The ants bite down with ferocious grip, their mandibles closing like biological staples. Once attached, the bodies are torn away, leaving the heads clamped shut across the wound. It is a practice born of both necessity and profound understanding of local ecology. The very creature that can devour a body alive is also a tool in preserving it. The army ant is not simply a predator, it is the embodiment of response. In the metaphor of the jungle as a superorganism, they represent a nervous system at work, not the passive relay of information, but the active mobilization of force. A single disturbance, a shifting pheromone trail, a breached nest, a chemical anomaly, can trigger the movement of hundreds of thousands. In this way, the jungle does not merely observe its environment, it reacts decisively and without emotion. There is no negotiation in a swarm, there is only motion. They have no eyes, yet navigate the most complex terrain in the world. They have no speech, yet coordinate attacks with a level of efficiency that challenges artificial intelligence models. They construct bridges from their bodies to span gaps, rafts to float across rivers, fans to ventilate overheated bivouacs. No single ant knows what is happening on a large scale, yet collectively they behave as though guided by design. This is not mysticism. It is the product of millions of years of evolution, refined through selection, refined again by environmental pressure. And that environment is changing. As roads are cut through the forest, as cattle clearings widen, as human settlements push deeper into jungle margins, army ant behavior adapts. In disturbed habitats, swarm raids become more frequent and more aggressive. Colonies fragment and reform. New prey is introduced, domestic animals, stored food, human waste. The jungle does not react passively to invasion, it rewires itself. Its networks shift, its nervous system pulses in new directions. To the untrained eye, a line of ants across the jungle floor may seem trivial, a curiosity, a living ribbon. But to the forest, that line is a signal, a recalibration, a test of response time, a neural circuit being fired. And what it leads to is not always visible at first. But when the swarm comes, it comes like a reflex, a contraction of the forest's will. Swift, accurate, relentless. There are no negotiations with instinct. There is no mercy in emergent design. Army ants do not patrol their environment, they embody it. They do not choose cruelty or compassion. They operate on feedback, thresholds, and need. And when the jungle perceives disruption, the swarm is not far behind. In the still waters of the Amazon's flooded forest, where light filters down in soft shafts and the air hangs thick with the breath of a million plants, movement is slow. The surface breaks only for a dragonfly's wings or the ripple of a falling fruit. But below, hidden among submerged roots and decomposing leaves, something ancient stirs. It doesn't chase, it doesn't hurry, it waits. In these dark, oxygen-rich wetlands, the Varzea and Igapo, the green anaconda, Eunectes murinus, coils like a living artery, pulsing silently through the veins of the jungle. The anaconda is not merely a predator, it is the river's rhythm embodied in muscle and scale. At lengths exceeding 6 meters and weights pushing 200 kilograms, it is the heaviest snake in the world, denser than its longer cousin, the reticulated python. But mass is not its power, its advantage lies in presence. In this saturated environment where sound travels farther underwater and visibility is measured in centimeters, the anaconda's hunting strategy is an exercise in stillness. Wrapped within the submerged roots of a ceiba or gliding among papyrus reeds, it becomes indistinguishable from the currents themselves. It doesn't need to chase because it is the place its prey is coming to. The anaconda's role in the metaphorical superorganism of the Amazon is visceral and symbolic. It mirrors the blood within a body, slow when idle, surging when called upon. As it moves through its watery domain, it connects systems, swamps to streams, fish to caimans, capybaras to jaguars. Like the circulatory system, it doesn't discriminate in function. It transports energy, redistributes life, and occasionally reclaims it. Among the river's edges, native folklore treats the anaconda with deep reverence. Some see it as a shapeshifter, Sukuriju gigante, a guardian spirit that rules over the waters. Others tell of it swallowing boats whole, dragging entire families into the murk. These myths, exaggerated over generations, are rooted in the undeniable truth of the snake's power. Few animals hold such sway over the imagination, and fewer still are capable of the same mechanical violence wrapped in evolutionary grace. When the strike comes, it is not a spectacle of speed. There is no warning rattle, no sudden rustle. The attack is surgical, executed in one fluid contraction of muscle and leverage. The anaconda is an ambush predator, using heat-sensing pits along its jaw and a tongue constantly sampling the air to locate prey. Fish, birds, reptiles, even mammals like capybara and deer. Any animal that comes to drink, swim, or cross a stream is a potential target. The moment jaws close, the coils rise in a precise pattern, looping not randomly, but around the thorax and neck, maximizing pressure where it matters most. Contrary to popular belief, the anaconda does not kill by crushing bones. Instead, it cuts off circulation. Each coil tightens just slightly with every exhale of the prey, maintaining pressure on the heart and lungs until the blood ceases to flow. Death comes through circulatory arrest, a silent suffocation from within, where organs starve before the brain ever registers panic. The process can take minutes. In large prey, it may last longer, especially in water, where the snake leverages buoyancy to increase constriction force with less effort. This brings us to the true danger for humans. While attacks are exceedingly rare, they are not impossible. Human settlements expanding along the edges of rivers, especially in northern Brazil and eastern Peru, have increasingly come into conflict with anaconda habitats. In isolated cases, often involving fishermen, children, or those crossing water at dusk, large anacondas have been documented initiating predation behavior. The outcomes vary. Most flee when detected, but in rare instances where the snake is large enough and the opportunity arises, the story unfolds differently. In water, the odds shift. Here, the anaconda has every advantage. Its body is buoyed and unburdened. Its lungs allow it to remain submerged for over 10 minutes. Its eyes and nostrils are placed high on the head, allowing it to observe while almost fully hidden. It moves without sound. If a human is taken, especially one who cannot swim well or is already entangled in submerged vegetation, the snake's method is chilling. A single strike, a coil around the torso, and the victim is dragged downward. Not to be drowned in the violent thrashing of jaws, but in the quiet, inescapable grip of hydraulic compression. Swallowing prey whole is not an exaggeration. The anaconda's skull is a marvel of flexible engineering. Its two lower jaws are not fused, allowing them to spread apart while muscles guide food into the esophagus. The larynx is displaced forward, allowing the snake to breathe even as it eats. The prey is taken head first, its limbs folded by constriction, sliding slowly into the gullet with the aid of recurved teeth and peristaltic motion. For prey the size of a capybara, this process may take hours. For a human, should it ever occur, death would have arrived long before the first vertebra passed the mouth. But beyond its capacity for violence lies the anaconda's ecological necessity. As an apex predator in aquatic and semi-aquatic systems, it regulates populations of fish, amphibians, reptiles, and small mammals. It competes directly with caimans and large predatory birds, forming part of a tightly woven food web that relies on balance more than abundance. Unlike jaguars, which patrol wide territories, the anaconda operates within a specific aquatic range, revisiting hunting sites based on seasonal floods, prey migration, and water chemistry. During the dry season, when water levels fall and the forest contracts, anacondas often become stranded in shrinking pools, hotbeds of biodiversity and competition. Here, they enter periods of reduced activity, basking for thermoregulation or slipping into metabolic torpor. Their physiology adapts. They can go weeks without feeding, digesting large meals slowly, reallocating energy to survival rather than movement. In these moments, the snake becomes almost a geological feature, immobile, hidden beneath a log or submerged beneath silt. But even then, it listens. The pressure waves of a swimming fish, the scent of a nesting bird, the vibration of hooves crossing water. The anaconda's biology is shaped entirely by its medium. Water is not merely its habitat, it is its weapon, its camouflage, and its escape route. Evolution has rendered the green anaconda nearly helpless on land, slow, heavy, awkward. But in the water, its muscle becomes fluid and its perception sharpens. Lateral undulation propels it with barely a ripple. Muscular ribs compress and expand like a bellows, modulating buoyancy. Even its coloration, a blotched pattern of olive and black, blends seamlessly with riverweed and submerged leaf litter. To those who study the Amazon as a single, breathing entity, the anaconda represents more than predation. It is transport, both literal and symbolic. It moves energy across systems. It feeds jaguars with its young, clears diseased animals from the water, and links the land to the aquatic realm in a way few species can. If the forest were alive, not just alive biologically, but sentient, reactive, then the anaconda would be its arterial current, surging not with rage, but with inevitability. The jungle doesn't broadcast its threats. It doesn't display its warnings with teeth and claws. Instead, it flows beneath the surface. It waits where it cannot be seen. It tightens around what it does not want to let go. And in that moment, coiled, watching, ready, the anaconda is not simply part of the forest. It is its pulse, its response, its grip on anything that dares to enter without understanding the price of intrusion. At first glance, the poison dart frog is easy to miss. Small, delicate, and not much larger than a human thumbnail, it seems an unlikely contender in the web of Amazonian power dynamics. Yet as light breaks through the low canopy and dances across the damp understory, their presence becomes unavoidable. Tiny bodies gleam with impossible color, electric blue, neon yellow, fire orange, or blood red, pigments that blaze like warning signs against the green chaos of the jungle floor. These frogs do not run, do not hide. Their brilliance is not camouflage, but proclamation. Here is something you do not want to touch. The Amazon is a crucible of chemical warfare. Plants defend themselves with alkaloids and latex, insects counter with enzymes and toxins, and predators evolve resistance or perish. But among the most potent biological agents in this ecosystem, perhaps in any ecosystem, are the secretions of the Dendrobatidae, a family of frogs that have weaponized their very skin. They do not inject, they do not bite. They do not chase. Instead, they possess a defense so complete that mere contact is sometimes enough to end a life. This is not a defense evolved in isolation. The toxicity of poison dart frogs is not inherent. It is absorbed, drawn from the very jungle they inhabit. Specifically from their diet of leaf litter arthropods, tiny ants, beetles and mites rich in alkaloid compounds. The frogs ingest and metabolize these molecules without harm, storing them in granular glands beneath their skin. In captivity, fed on flies and crickets, they lose their potency entirely. It is not the frog alone that is dangerous, but the synergy between creature and environment, a biochemical reflection of place. These frogs, in a very literal sense, are what they eat, walking micropharmacies carrying the signatures of their territory. And it is a lethal signature. The most infamous species, Philobates terribilis, the golden poison frog of Colombia, produces batrachotoxin, one of the most powerful naturally occurring neurotoxins known to science. This compound binds to sodium channels in nerve and muscle cells, forcing them to remain open. The result is uncontrolled nerve firing, muscle spasms, paralysis, and cardiac arrest. There is no known antidote. Just 2 micrograms, barely visible to the naked eye, are enough to kill a grown human. A single frog may carry enough toxin to kill 10 to 20 adults. And yet it does not use this poison to hunt. It uses it to be left alone. In this, poison dart frogs serve a unique ecological role. If the Amazon is understood as a superorganism, a living, coordinated entity, then these frogs are its immune cells. They don't stalk threats, they don't analyze motives. They simply exist, marking specific zones with the unambiguous biological equivalent of "do not enter." A predator that ignores the warning does not get a second chance to learn. Mammals and reptiles that make the mistake once rarely live to repeat it. In effect, these frogs turn their skin into a chemical boundary, drawing lines in the leaf litter that the jungle enforces with molecular severity. But the jungle, ever complex, has its collaborators. Indigenous tribes across the western Amazon have long understood the frog's deadly potential, not as fear, but as partnership. Hunters from groups such as the Embera and Kofan have developed techniques to harvest the frog's poison without killing it. The process is delicate, often involving ritual and taboos. The frog is gently stressed over an open fire, its skin secreting toxin, which is then carefully applied to blow darts or arrow tips. The weapon is transformed. A small, silent instrument, now capable of felling a monkey or bird with a single scratch. It is a relationship built on ancient knowledge, an alliance between human and amphibian, brokered by the chemistry of the forest. Yet for all its brilliance, the frog's biology is surprisingly fragile. These are creatures of precise conditions, high humidity, stable temperatures, specific prey. Their permeable skin, which makes them such efficient chemical vessels, also makes them vulnerable to environmental disruption. Pollution, habitat loss, and introduced pathogens like chytrid fungus, Batrachochytrium dendrobatidis, have devastated populations across South America. In some regions, entire species have disappeared within a decade. The immune system of the forest is under attack, and its guardians are dying without ever raising a cry. But when they do survive, when the balance holds, poison dart frogs exemplify evolutionary elegance. Their mating rituals are complex and vocal. Males call from elevated perches to attract females, often engaging in territorial disputes, ritualized pushing contests where one frog attempts to climb atop the other. Once a female chooses a mate, she follows him to a pre-selected site, a curled leaf or shallow depression, where eggs are laid and fertilized externally. After hatching, the tadpoles are carried one by one on the male's back to water-filled bromeliads or tree holes, where they continue development. Some species will even feed their young with unfertilized eggs, a rare form of parental investment among amphibians. These life cycles are interwoven with the health of the forest. Bromeliads must remain hydrated. Insects must be abundant. If the forest's bloodstream is blocked by drought, fire, or logging, then these microhabitats dry up. Tadpoles die. Generations end. And with each loss, the forest loses part of its defense, not just a chemical arsenal, but a signal. A message encoded in color and behavior. This place is alive, and it protects itself. One of the more overlooked dangers to humans arises not from intentional contact, but from ignorance. A brightly colored frog, barely a few centimeters long, may seem a harmless curiosity to an uninformed traveler. But skin contact, especially with broken skin or mucous membranes, can transfer enough toxin to cause numbness, dizziness, and in rare cases, systemic failure. In field settings, biologists take extreme precautions, wearing gloves, avoiding facial contact, and meticulously washing after handling even non-toxic individuals. Because while not all Dendrobatidae are dangerous to humans, the risk is not always apparent until symptoms begin. There is an unsettling irony here. The jungle's smallest guardians, evolved to repel its predators, now find themselves defenseless against its greatest invader, us. Deforestation and illegal wildlife trade continue to threaten poison dart frogs, despite legal protections. Captured for the exotic pet market, they are shipped across continents. Bright trophies drained of their chemical defenses, no longer toxic outside their native diets. In losing their ecology, they lose their identity, yet the forest remembers. And when the rains return, when the leaf litter is damp and the bromeliads overflow, the frogs emerge again, small, vibrant, unflinching. They do not chase, they do not flee. They only sit and shine and warn. Their message is clear. Not through roar or rattle, but through presence. Here lies a boundary. Here the jungle has drawn its line, not in claw or fang, but in molecule. If the forest is alive and aware, then poison dart frogs are not merely part of its beauty. They are its first line of defense, its chemical sentries, its quiet declaration that some places are meant to remain untouched. They are the immune response of a breathing ecosystem, evolved not for conquest, but for control. And in their color, unnatural, defiant, undeniable, the jungle speaks. In the stillness between dusk and dark, just as the last parrots wheel through the canopy and the howlers settle into distant barks, there comes a silence that feels heavier than absence. The kind of silence that doesn't merely mark the end of sound, but the arrival of presence. Somewhere beneath the dense lattice of vines and shadows, something watches. It does not move rashly. It does not breathe heavily. It waits, unseen, unheard, and almost unfelt. The forest seems no different, but everything in it behaves as though being measured. This is not fear in the air, it is calculation. Because the jaguar is awake. Unlike any other predator in South America, the jaguar, Panthera onca, does not stalk openly. It haunts. In the biological theater of the rainforest, it is not the constant pressure of predation that shapes behavior. It is the memory of possibility. Jaguars are apex predators in the purest sense. Top of the trophic web, they are neither hunted nor tolerated. Their presence creates landscapes of fear, ecological zones where prey behavior is modified in anticipation of something that may never come. Tapirs shift their feeding grounds. Capybaras delay leaving the water. Monkeys fall unnaturally silent. The jaguar may not be visible, but its influence is etched into the choices of everything around it. There is a reason for this dread. Jaguars are ambush hunters, relying on stealth and strength rather than pursuit. Short, heavily muscled limbs and a low-slung body allow them to move silently through the densest undergrowth. Their rosetted coat, a pattern of dark rings surrounding central spots, offers extraordinary camouflage, breaking up the outline of the body against shadow and light. Vision and hearing are acute, but it is their sense of smell that often seals the fate of prey. They move with precision along scent trails, calculating angles, reading terrain, and identifying vulnerabilities. And then they strike. Not with the neck bite typical of other big cats, but with a devastating, skull-piercing blow. The jaguar's jaws are among the most powerful of any mammal, capable of exerting over 1,500 psi pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush turtle shells and pierce the temporal bones of monkeys, deer, and even caimans. Their signature kill involves driving their canines directly through the back of the skull, into the brain, a method both gruesome and final. There is no struggle, no prolonged chase. Death arrives in silence, and often the first sound a prey animal hears is the last thing it experiences. This method of killing also sets the jaguar apart ecologically. While lions and leopards often deliver messy kills requiring prolonged suffocation, the jaguar's surgical dispatch minimizes the chance of injury. This is not mercy. It is efficiency, shaped by a life where a single broken tooth could mean starvation. And because the kill is so fast, scavengers are rarely drawn by the sounds of distress. The jaguar eats undisturbed, often dragging its prey into dense vegetation or up the bank of a river, where it can feed over the course of several days. These traits have given rise to myth. Across Amazonian cultures, the jaguar holds a sacred, often paradoxical role, feared and revered in equal measure. In the cosmologies of the Shipibo-Conibo, the Matses, and other indigenous groups, the jaguar is seen not merely as an animal, but as a being, a gatekeeper between realms, a guide to the spirit world, a guardian of sacred knowledge. Shamans who become jaguar during ritual trance are believed to travel beyond the physical, adopting the feline senses, instincts, and sometimes its hunger. In these traditions, to dream of a jaguar is a powerful omen, either of great strength or looming danger. If the forest were a thinking entity, the jaguar would be its final line of defense, an executioner summoned only when subtler systems fail. Army ants may react instantly, poison frogs may deter with chemistry, anacondas may defend the water's edge. But the jaguar acts with intent. It is not everywhere, but it is always somewhere. And when the intrusion becomes too deep, when the trees fall too quickly, when the noise grows too constant, then the forest sends its shadow. Human interactions with jaguars have always been marked by uncertainty. For the most part, these cats avoid us. They learn quickly. They remember faces, routes, even voices. But when the system breaks, when prey becomes scarce, when injuries make normal hunting impossible, jaguars can turn to humans. There are documented cases from the Peruvian Amazon, the Brazilian Pantanal, and the forests of Guyana where individual jaguars have become man-eaters. These are not stories of frenzy or madness. They are stories of strategy. A jaguar that learns human patterns, waits outside a village trail, strikes at the weakest. Often it is old cats, those whose teeth are cracked, whose joints have stiffened, who choose this path. But in rare cases, healthy individuals have also killed, possibly in response to territory infringement or retaliatory violence. The psychological impact of such attacks on remote communities is profound. Unlike crocodiles or snakes, which strike from necessity, a jaguar's kill can feel deliberate. The precision of the bite, the absence of struggle, the eerie silence, it all suggests a predator that is not just strong but aware. Some victims are taken in daylight, others disappear at night without a sound. In one well-documented case, a jaguar reportedly stalked a settlement for weeks, killing dogs first, then humans. It was eventually tracked and killed, but not before leaving behind a legacy of fear and respect that would last generations. Still, jaguars are not villains. They are essential. By preying on large herbivores like peccaries and capybaras, they regulate populations that would otherwise overgraze sensitive understory vegetation. Their presence supports the balance of seed dispersal, plant regeneration, and nutrient cycling. And as apex predators, their health reflects the health of the system. A forest without jaguars is a forest that has already lost too much. But pressure is mounting. Deforestation, driven by agriculture, mining, and infrastructure development, is fragmenting jaguar habitat across their range. Corridors once used for migration and mating are now cut by roads and fences. Poaching, whether for pelts, trophies, or retaliatory killings, continues despite legal protections. As space diminishes, conflict increases. Jaguars, like all large carnivores, require space, not just for food, but for silence, for stealth, for the behaviors that keep them invisible. When those behaviors break down, so does the myth. And what emerges is not a monster, but a misunderstood warning. The jaguar does not kill without reason, but when it does kill, it does so completely. Like an immune response activated too late, its action is disproportionate, but only because the system is already compromised. To observe a jaguar in the wild is to witness the embodiment of the forest's will, not its rage, but its resolve. It is not a frequent event. Many biologists spend years in the field without seeing one. But the signs are there, a half-eaten carcass pulled into the ferns, claw marks on a tree, a still warm patch of ground. The jaguar passes like a ghost, leaving evidence only for those who know where and how to look. It is this ambiguity that defines the jaguar's role in the Amazonian superorganism. It is the last response, the consequence after all others have failed. When diplomacy ends and warnings are ignored, the jaguar acts swiftly, quietly, finally. The jungle does not roar, it does not howl. But when it chooses to strike, it sends a jaguar. Not to terrify, but to correct. Not to chase, but to end. And in that silence after the strike, the forest breathes again, just once, before returning to watchful stillness. The Amazon does not begin with spectacle. It begins with breath. A slow, nearly imperceptible exhale through a trillion pores, the silent evaporation of water from every leaf, their molecular whisper of gases exchanged, the transmutation of sunlight into sugar. From above, the forest appears like a living skin stretched across the contours of a continent, undulating, sweating, growing, breathing. But what lies beneath the canopy is not mere biomass. It is not just a collection of organisms. What pulses here day and night in a great interwoven thrum of matter and purpose is something far more complex. The jungle is not passive. It is not static. It is not indifferent. It is a network of relationships so ancient and intricate that the boundary between organism and environment begins to blur. In every square meter, millions of interactions unfold simultaneously. Fungi connecting tree roots in silent chemical conversations, ants farming aphids, sloths shedding algae-rich fur that feeds moths, which in turn fertilize the sloth's host tree. Feedback loops stretch across time and distance, some lasting minutes, others generations. And scattered within this biological circuitry are creatures whose roles defy classification, not as species alone, but as systems within systems, working in concert like the organs of a vast, self-regulating body. The bats were the first to stir. Long before the forest floor grew still, before the final rays of the sun flickered off bromeliad pools, they took to their tiny mammalian scouts, slicing through a blackness no eye could navigate. With their echolocation, they wove three-dimensional maps of the jungle's shifting architecture. Their calls bounced from leaves to branches to prey, returning not just coordinates, but context. Bats detected the unseen, where insects congregated, where fruits had ripened, where disturbances pressed unnaturally against the air. They were not just navigators, they were sensors, aerial receptors feeding the first signal into the jungle's body-wide awareness. Then the army ants responded. Their movements did not resemble animals so much as algorithms. Pheromone trails drew roads across the leaf litter. Columns adjusted in real time, branching and reconvening with stunning coordination. To those unfamiliar with their purpose, they might seem chaotic, a biological spill. But every movement served a function. When a prey colony was detected, the signal propagated instantly through the swarm, triggering a rapid collective shift. They were not just hunters, they were nerves, a decentralized nervous system reacting to chemical input, delivering precise, often brutal responses. Their work cleared space, recycled nutrients, and reset balances. But when pushed too far, when territory was encroached or prey collapsed, their reflex turned defensive. That reflex was swift, and it did not end until the stimulus was erased. Through the waterways and flooded forest moved the anaconda, more sensation than sight, more shadow than serpent. It did not rush. It shifted, pulsed, coiled, and released with the patience of tide and blood. It connected disparate pools and riverbanks, linking aquatic and terrestrial food webs through ambush and digestion. Its strength was not in numbers but in mass, in the sheer inevitability of its presence. The anaconda needed no packs or planning. It was the pulse of the forest, the slow, muscular churn of energy between regions. When it killed, it did so without spectacle, wrapping, squeezing, drowning, swallowing. It did not threaten, it consumed. The poison dart frogs, smaller than a human thumb, radiated a very different kind of power. Their coloration was a flag planted in the soil of chemical war. They were not hidden. They were a message, vibrant and immediate. The molecular weapons stored beneath their skin, absorbed from alkaloid-rich insects, served not only as personal defense, but as deterrents to entire food chains. To touch them was to trigger paralysis, organ failure, death. They were not predators. They were immune cells deployed in strategic zones to prevent entry, to mark boundaries, to enforce biochemical sovereignty. Their warning was silent but absolute. And when all other defenses failed, the jaguar arrived. Not often, not visibly, but always with intent. It did not patrol, it stalked. It did not chase, it waited. When it killed, it ended things. With jaws designed to puncture bone and habits shaped by absolute autonomy, the jaguar did not ask permission. It made decisions about where, when, and who. In this imagined superorganism, the jaguar is not just the final line of defense. It is judgment, the claw unsheathed when all other systems are ignored. And unlike the army ants or frogs, its action feels disturbingly conscious. This framework of the forest as body, its creatures as organs, is not just metaphor. In ecological terms, it is a plausible construct. Feedback mechanisms exist between species and their habitats. Predator-prey cycles regulate populations. Keystone species, like jaguars or certain canopy trees, structure entire ecosystems around their presence. What emerges is a system closer to physiology than it is to pure chance. Each part operates semi-independently, but is tied to the whole. When one fails, another compensates. When multiple systems are stressed, the forest responds. It recalibrates its nutrient flow, its predation patterns, even its microbial communities. And what happens when the stress becomes constant? When chainsaws replace cicadas, when mercury leaks into rivers, when roads cut the migratory paths of butterflies and bats, the forest begins to suffer from something very much like autoimmune dysfunction. Bats disappear, severing the jungle's ability to sense. Ants shift behavior, becoming more aggressive, more invasive. Frogs lose their alkaloids, becoming targets instead of warnings. The jaguar, deprived of its preferred prey, is pushed to the margins, closer to livestock, closer to people. And the feedback loops that once ensured equilibrium begin to spiral. For the human intruder, this transformation may not be immediately visible. The forest still looks green, still feels wet, still echoes with birdsong, but something has changed beneath the surface. The signals are different now. The thresholds have moved, and when they're crossed, the consequences arrive with terrifying precision. It might begin with a cough. A fungal spore from bat guano inhaled during a cave descent. Histoplasma capsulatum infecting the lungs. Days later, fever, night sweats, respiratory collapse. Or perhaps it's a routine walk through ankle-deep floodwater. A sudden coil, a pull downward. The cold pressure of an anaconda's grip before the world goes dark. Or a frog, bright and beautiful, picked up for a photo, followed by tingling hands, then numbness, then a heart that no longer beats in rhythm. Or it might be nothing at all, just a flicker at the edge of vision. A rustle, the memory of being watched, and then nothing. Because this place is not passive, it never was. The Amazon does not simply host life, it orchestrates it. It filters, processes, adapts, evolves. It detects and decides. And when something enters it that does not belong, something that takes too much or stays too long, the response is not vengeance. It is rejection. You were not hunted, you were corrected. To enter the Amazon is not to explore a wilderness. It is to step into a functioning superorganism, ancient and precise. Every leaf is a sensor, every animal a node, every river a vein, and every action, cut, burn, take, reverberates. Not as echo, but as stimulus. So when you step into the jungle, you are not alone. You are inside something, and maybe, just maybe, it already knows you're there.